Y'all bow with me. Lord, we come asking you to stay with us today. Look down on us, protect us, keep us in your hands, guide us. Let us do things that are pleasing, and let those things that we do that aren't so pleasing, please forgive us. Be with us, help us. In Jesus' name, amen. Good morning. I had to cut mine off. The rules chairman of the Senate sending me dirty messages. I know I asked for dumb things, but goodness gracious. Okay. On the wall, Mr. Gassert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I have two bills I'm asking for. They're under structured rule, Senate Bill 206 and Senate Resolution 371. With the Chair's permission, I'll just talk about them together because they are related legislation. Senate Resolution 371 is an application for a balanced budget amendment at the federal level. There are two ways to balance or to do a constitutional amendment in the United States under Article 5. The first is if Congress itself proposes an amendment that's sent to the states for ratification, requiring 3/4 of the states to ratify. The alternative method is if Congress refuses to act, which they have under these circumstances. They refuse to balance a budget, in fact, have not even passed a budget in the last 4 years, and are running huge deficits of at least $1 trillion a year. Under those type of circumstances, the Constitution allows the states to propose an amendment convention for the purpose of proposing an amendment to be sent back to the states for ratification. And that's what this asks to do. It requires 2/3 of the states to make such an application to Congress. Georgia would be the 20th state. We'll need 34 to force Congress to act to call a convention. Senate Bill 206 alleviates some fears that there are some that have that such a convention might go beyond its call and ask for more than one amendment to the Constitution. Senate Bill 206 sets forth a method of choosing the delegates from the state of Georgia and limits them to consider only the single issue of a balanced budget amendment. It allows the governor to appoint 2 of the delegates, the lieutenant governor to appoint 2 of the delegates, and the speaker to appoint 2 of the delegates. Those 6 delegates from amongst themselves would choose a 7th to make up the delegation from Georgia. They would all take an oath that they would consider only an amendment to balance the United States budget. They would be subject to recall if they went outside of the scope of that call, and would also be obligated to follow the instructions presented to them by the Georgia General Assembly. I think that's a reasonable mechanism to make sure that this did not consider any additional subject matters. I'm pleased to state that the Georgia Tea Party Patriots do support this 100%. You might hear 1 or 2 groups that have some concerns. I think that would only be because of a fundamental misunderstanding. This convention of the states would not have the power to amend the Constitution. They could only propose an amendment to the states for ratification of 3/4. And I feel very strongly that this is probably the major issue facing our nation today is our fiscal irresponsibility. At the state level, 49 of the 50 states have constitutional provisions like Georgia does that require us to operate under a balanced budget. The United States has no such provision, and they obviously do not operate under a balanced budget. Our national deficit's now $16.5 trillion and growing by about $1 trillion a year, and it's just unsustainable, and I hope that this would be favorably considered by your committee.
Are there any questions? Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this initiative. Certainly supported the concept, but myself and I'm sure several others have received emails, I think all in the category of the con group. Can you address that for us?
I can, and that's why I mentioned that the Georgia Tea Party Patriots support it now. This passed last year, by the way. Passed the Senate, got out of committee in the House. got on your rules calendar the last day or two, but just didn't get called up for a vote. It was in Chairman Hamilton's committee that it came out of last year. Those people that refer to it as a convention have a misunderstanding that it's a constitutional convention to revise the United States Constitution rather than an amendment constitution or amendment convention under Article 5 to deal with this subject matter. This calls for just, and all these other 19 states that have already submitted these are also asking for the single subject matter of a balanced budget amendment. I think once those folks understand that it's just for one subject matter, it does have an exception, by the way, for a national emergency as well. Otherwise, it would need to be balanced. But once they realize that it's just that single subject matter and that whatever comes out of that convention, the language of it has to be submitted to all states for 3/4 of them to ratify it, that alleviates the fears that anything could get out of hand. That Senate Bill 206 that limits our delegates is being mirrored around the country as well by other states that are in this Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force. It came out of ALEC a few years ago, and I think that alleviates any of those fears. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Question. Beyond the symbolism, what is the reason for limiting delegates to 7? Is that representative of 10 million citizens where we have much more congressional representation than 7? And did not the original Constitution, on the Articles of Confederation, they were not bound by an oath, but they created the entire Constitution?
They didn't create, they proposed one and sent it to the states for ratification. That was different back then because their call of their convention, like Chairman Smith said, was a constitutional convention rather than an amendment convention, which we're proposing here. I would suggest to you that this is a bipartisan type approach, that it isn't a partisan type issue. Georgia had an identical resolution pending for many years that passed in 1976 when this legislature was greatly dominated by the Democratic Party.
My original question.
Well, I just 7 delegates. I just chose that because other states are doing it. Any states can select their delegates by whatever mechanism they choose. This is just something that we do in a lot of other areas where we appoint commissions and such. It's no magic to it. Each state just gets 1 vote, however they were to bring up their delegations, or and it could be some states elect them, some have larger groups, but each state would just get 1 vote.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ligon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Mr. Chairman, I bring before you Senate Bill 68. It's under the modified structure rule, the Celebrate Freedom Week, where we require approximately 3 hours of instruction within the school system centering on our Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and founding documents. It also creates an online resource for teachers to be able to have lesson plans and access to other important materials that they could use in their lesson plans. And this has been done in other states. There's some very good resources available. The cost for that would be between $10,000 and $15,000 to create that resource page on the website.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ginn.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Said Frank Ginn, Senate District 47, wanted to thank y'all for sending us a great gun bill, Senate Bill 101.
Frank asked for them. Let's go get out. They'll be on tomorrow. Bye.
Could I ask for Senate Bill 104?
I asked for them. 104.
That's the only one I want to ask for this morning, sir.
You going to leave 177 alone?
I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I didn't.
I know more about your business than you do.
I know you do, and I appreciate Elmer keeping me on my tabs. Thank you, sir. Said if I'd love to ask for Senate Bill 104 and Senate Bill 177, and I know you know more about my business than I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hill. My only no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Did you know that, Earl? My only no vote. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm coming to request Senate Bill 242. It is, it's not totally accurate what it says here. So it basically what this does is it expands the footprint of the Downtown Development Authority as it relates only to doing these projects, so that in this case the City of Atlanta can conduct these PACE program projects that allows for special financing for renewable energy to buildings that goes outside of the footprint of the Downtown Development Authority, and in this case would include the entire City of Atlanta.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Towles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill's not listed on the sheet, but it's Senate Bill 156. It's a forestry bill.
It's on the calendar for today.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. You're a great American.
When you get over there in our landfill, let me know how great I am.
Anytime, brother. I've been working hard for House bills this morning. Since 6:30 this morning, I've been here working with those House bills.
Inert landfill.
You know, I had a great committee meeting the other day. It's rare that this occurs, but I said, you know, we don't have time to debate these great House bills that we have on committee today. So the chairman is going to go ahead and move that all these bills come out of committee, and we'll just talk about them when they're on the floor. Consent calendar at Natural Resource Committee the other day. Very efficient government.
It's about time.
You know, kind of like a bottle of fine wine. It just gets better with time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait just 1 second. Mr. Rice.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I see Senate Bill 213 down here in the modified structure. Are you asking for that also?
Yes, I do see it. I appreciate that.
I guess my question is,
I was kind of hoping we'd forget that one.
You're getting a what?
for the emails on that, I don't know much about aquifers. If you could enlighten me as to why I'm getting all this.
I tell you probably get a lot of misinformation on those emails. And the Flint River Drought Protection Act that already exists in a law, this is amending that. And it's a very serious situation down in southwest Georgia. Big agricultural belt of the state of Georgia. And basically what some people are wanting to occur is us not to augment any stream flows down there and let them dry up so they can sue on the Endangered Species Act, which then will shut down water withdrawals in southwest Georgia. So I'm trying to be a balanced, rational human. This water policy is very sensitive, and the emails that you're probably getting are wanting us to do things that really could be detrimental to the whole southwest region of the state. And I'm not beating anybody up on that. I'm just telling it to you like it is. This is and Chairman McCall did a great job handling this the other day, and it's very sensitive policy. And we had an amendment in the Senate that was really a bad amendment. And when they amend something and don't even know what they're doing to amend it, that's dangerous.
Mr. Ramsey.
Are we talking, is it okay to talk about 213 here?
I don't want to.
Are you asking for the bill here?
He is.
Yes, I'd love to see the bill moved on, because this is important water policy for the state of Georgia and that southwest region of the state.
I know you know the water issue as well as anybody at the Capitol, but I guess an augmentation water, that's meant to increase stream flow, correct? That's the goal, and we're giving the department the ability to fund those type of projects. I guess my question / concern is this: in line 183 to 210 of the bill, it talks about limiting at the director's discretion the ability of downstream permit holders the ability to take water from these augmented flows. I have no idea how that would work, how that would be measured, and it really comes close, my reading bill, maybe you can disabuse me of this, but to amounting to a taking of the property rights.
No, it really doesn't. And let me kind of explain that, because it is an issue that keeps getting brought up. But what will occur in southwest Georgia, the only time we augment any flow like the Spring Creek region, we put a well in to augment there, is in times of serious drought. Because you get into times of serious drought, that Spring Creek basically dried up. And then you get into the Endangered Species Act when that happens. So what we want to do is augment the flows whenever we're in times of serious drought to keep from having that. Now, a lot of people don't want us to augment flows so they can sue on endangered species. But what I say is more important is that we continue to keep that southwest region of the state of Georgia balanced environmentally and business-wise. And I don't live there either. I live in Middle Georgia. I don't live in the southwest region. But I'm doing everything I can policy-wise to make sure that we're balanced down in that southwest region. But when you say you can't take the augmented flow out, the only time we're augmenting is in times of serious drought. So if you took the augmented flow out, would be you'd have a dry ditch again. So that's the reason for that. It wouldn't occur except in times of extreme drought, and when we augment, we got to leave the augmented flow in there, because why augment if we're going to suck it right out too and you just have a dry ditch? And that's what would occur.
And the downstream permit holders, just because I don't have the Flint runs through my
Mm-hmm.
how many are there along the, is it, we talking
I don't know. I don't know how many there are.
dozens, hundreds?
There's a lot of them, and I don't want to say a number because I would be wrong. I'd like to get that number for you, but well, that's what all this addresses, and that's what the original legislation that is in law addresses too. Now, I'll tell you this, and I told EPD also that after the session's over, I want to sit down and look at the whole Flint River Basin and have a discussion about the whole basin and make sure that we're balancing our policy. But this particular Flint River Drought Protection Act, the original act that was passed, it deals with that southern region of the Flint River. But I do think that we need to have a policy discussion on the whole to make sure we're balanced everywhere. Because you don't want to do something to one section of it that you're not doing to the other section, and make everybody accountable to that flow of water. Yes, sir.
Minority Leader, Ms. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I don't think it's coming yet.
You just holler at me.
Let's try again.
My wife does, so.
I'll
You're good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, along the lines of Representative Ramsey's concerns, I think the rest of the bill seems valid and necessary, but my concern is that the way the plain language is written in that section, it seems to suggest that if anyone does take advantage of that water flow, that we are somehow restricting riparian rights along the flow, and that there are consequences to anyone who touches those water rights. What are the consequences for violation of this section? So let's say you're a farmer who's downstream who notices that there is increased flow and decides to use your pivot irrigation system to grab that flow, but you weren't one of the permitted people, or you didn't pay the money that was necessary. What's the consequence for those users?
Now, I didn't catch all that because I couldn't quite hear you. I don't have my hearing aids on this morning either. I should have worn them. But the whole issue is when you talk about the augmentation of that flow, and remember this, the surface and the groundwater are interconnected. Okay, it's not like you just got water running down a river and it's not interconnected to that surface water underneath also. Those things are all connected, and this does not even occur except times of extreme drought. And the auction on there to in times of extreme drought to take irrigation land out of production for that season is in there for a reason, to make sure that we balance the amount of water we're taking out of the ground. Because when you're sucking it out of the ground, you also can dry up surface water too. So it's all a big balance, and that's the dangerous thing about amending these kind of bills on the fly, is because everything is an extremely important balance. And that whole region in the Southwest region is a very strong agricultural belt that creates a lot of revenue for the state.
So, and I appreciate that explanation. My question is, what are the consequences? So if you're in an extreme drought, if you're in an extreme drought situation, and there's a farmer who, because of the interconnectedness of the groundwater and the stream, takes water out using this during an augmented flow, I have no objection to the augmentation. My concern is about the restriction on who can access the flow. What are the consequences if someone violates the permit and pulls water out of the flow and didn't?
You're really going to, I mean, at the end of the day, we cannot pass anything. We cannot do any water policy. But what will occur is then, in times of extreme drought, those people will be restricted from drawing water out of the flows, period. And if we don't do any augmentation, in those extreme drought periods, you'll have Endangered Species Act lawsuits filed, and it'll shut down withdrawals. And you really don't want the courts doing that water policy for those people down there. You try to keep that balance, and you try to work with them, and we work with that region real well to try to make sure that we're doing a balanced policy to protect their ability to draw water and also to protect their ability to have enough water there to draw from.
Mr. Willard. Okay, thank you. Ms. Smith.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman, and I'm just lending my support to the statements that Chairman Tolleson is saying. This is a debate that has been ongoing for at least 16, maybe 20 years, and it keeps coming back under different forms, but the Drought Protection Act was critical to that part of the economy of our state of Georgia. Don't forget, we're in a tri-state water wars, and in times of drought, our code already gives our EPD director a lot of power during that time. If you lived in the Atlanta area, do you remember the alternating days, then the limited days, and then no days? So to single out one area of the state without considering the whole state is really a limited consideration of this problem. It's extremely serious, and I support Chairman Tolleson. Thank you.
No more questions. Thank you, Mr. Tolleson. Ms. Orrock.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to ask for Senate Resolution 413, Senator Orrock, District 36, and Representative Andy Welch would carry this simple resolution on the floor. It simply urges adult Georgians to give full consideration to drafting their own advance directive for health care, to appoint a health care agent, and be able to state their own treatment preferences. We are also recognizing April 16th as the annual Health Care Decisions Day, which will be encouraging this direction for Georgians, and the Georgia Health Policy Center helped provide this language, which tracks language that several other states are passing to encourage, as we see the onset of so much dementia in our elders and inability to make their own decisions, to give them this opportunity to do advance directives.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members.
Members of the committee. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I already spoke my support for Senate Bill 213, and I'm just reiterating it. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Chairman. At the appropriate time, I'd like to offer up the amendment that's on the desk, AM 292174. This is for Senate Bill 168, which is on the calendar today.
Let me get through these, and then I'll come back to you first. You can do that. We're going to come back. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Asking for Senate Bill 177.
Which one?
177.
Okay. Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by Senate Resolution 413.
Yancey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add my support to Senate Bill 242. It's an extremely important bill for the Atlanta Downtown Development Authority.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for Senate Bill 218, which is the road name and bridge naming. As you know, we always put ours on the House. I mean, on the Senate, they always put theirs on the House bills that moves across. There's been a few that's added to this one as it came across. Actually, I take that back. I'm sorry. That's SR 293. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. SR 293. SB 218 is the bridge. This is highway and bridges with as far as the records go. That same bill that we've been dealing with this whole session.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of Senator Davenport, Senate Bill 23, relating to helping us find a better way to locate this person.
Mr. Williams. Okay, all right. Okay. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to today's calendar. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For some strange reason, a MARTA bill got put on 168, and all this amendment does, AM 292174, it strips out the entire piece that was added in committee over here, and it returns Senate Bill 168 back to its original form, which is a good jobs bill that just puts some requirements in the bid process. And I'd ask to have that taken care of today.
Anybody got any questions to Mr. Hamilton on that bill? Okay. He's offered up to you AM 292174 as an amendment. It'll be have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, you do remember that that's on today's calendar, so this will be on your desk in a little while. Is Mr. Welch in this building? Keith, where's 276? Is it on the yellow sheet? On your desk, you've got AM 400068. My name's first on it, but it shouldn't be. It should be Mr. Welch's. But I told him since he wasn't on this committee, he could put my name down there. That bill has not passed out of the Senate. But when it does, this amendment needs to be added to it. And so what I was asking is that you would approve the amendment. It's relatively long. You've got some time to read it. Approve the amendment so that when it does come out of the Senate, it will automatically be on it. Can I get a motion to that? Any opposed? Okay, it's on. Okay. Mr. Golick, you got a recommendation?
Chairman, for floor debate today on SB 160, I'd like to move pursuant to Rule 33.3, the debate be limited to 1 hour, time to be equally divided at the discretion of the Speaker.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Sometimes it gets hard to make a calendar this late, particularly when you haven't got much to choose from. All right, we're going to say this is Tuesday's calendar. Under modified structure, SR 293. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified open, SB 218. Any opposition? Under modified open, SB 177. Under modified open, SB 104. Mr. Stevens, that'll have a amendment on the floor, won't it? That one, you'll see an amendment on your desk for that one. All those in favor signify by aye. That's the calendar.